Amazing. So welcome everybody to this Veganic Gardeners question time. Apologies for the little technical glitch there. I had my microphone on mute. So my name is Luke Scott III, and it's my absolute pleasure to be here to host this. And I love working with the Vegan Organic Network. It's an incredible organization. It's really changed my life, learning about stock-free farming and the different ways we can create these sustainable projects so we can create produce that is healthy and it's good for the planet, it's good for the animals, it's good for the people who consume it. And yeah, I really think we're ready. The world is ready for this shift. And so I'm doing a lot on my side to promote that. And today we've got an incredible panel for you. We have a few guests, and the first guest is Paul Handrick. Are you there, Paul? How are you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I've got you, Paul. So good to have you with us.
How are you?
So Paul, yeah, really good, excited. So Paul founded the Bee Sanctuary of Ireland, which is the only dedicated native bee sanctuary on the planet. And so it's no hives, no honey, just wild. And I think that's incredible, Paul. It's around 55 acres and it's been going since 2012. And Paul and his team, they're all about helping to create education around these endangered wild bee populations, because the bees are so important, aren't they, Paul, to nature, to the planet, and we really need to create more habitats and places where they can thrive.
We do, yeah. It's something we came across. We bought the farm back in 2011, 2012. And we went organic, then we went vegan organic, and we had, I think it was 5 years ago next September, I was sitting in a field of clover surrounded by bumblebees, and we'd gone away on a holiday, and we had some small amount of crops in the ground. We came back and the deer had eaten them all on us. So I was sitting there wondering, what am I going to do? I can't afford to put a deer fence around the whole place. And we knew the bees were in trouble, and it just didn't make sense to us that we had bumblebees all over the clover, and literally I was sitting there surrounded them. We just looked into it and decided we'll jump in, and we can have more impact and more effects rather than growing veg by advocating for wild bees and letting people know how much trouble they're in and what we can do, the simple solution we can put in place to save them.
Yeah, I have seen personally a lot of positive steps in bee education. It seems like a lot of people are taking up the cause and sharing about this. And yeah, it'd be fascinating to dive into that a little bit deeper, Paul, and we can help people a bit more educated around this issue.
Yep, great.
Our next panelist is the amazing Jo Kidd. So Jo and her family run a small veganic farm near Faversham in Kent. So they started farming in 2018, been vegan since 2003, and building on all these different projects, they followed their passion. So the goal is to live as ethically and compassionately and close to the earth as possible, which I think is something we can all get on board with. They do no plow approach as well, which is great. So completely no-till within the next few years, and also no single-use plastic, no concrete, and they're off-grid. So I love that. Certified organic with the Soil Association, and the produce they sell locally within a 5-mile radius and deliver by electric vehicles as well. So Jo, that sounds absolutely incredible. How are you? Thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Luke. Lovely to be here. Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Nice to be back.
Yeah, it fills my heart with so much joy to hear about these kind of projects. It's something I think a lot of us imagine and we wish we could create, and you've gone and done it. So how are you? How are you feeling about? You're doing it. Ongoing.
Yeah, didn't about done it, but we're doing it. We're learning. We're fast learners. Learning from lots of mistakes, but doing lots of good stuff is probably 90% of it's working. So I think that's not too bad. But lots more, more and more people are doing it, aren't they? So it's a really fast growing movement, which is great. We just need to speed it up.
Yeah, I know we only see what goes on in our circles, but in my circle, it seems like it's a big drive for people to create projects like this. And I know many beautiful souls who are doing that. So, yeah, I know you're going to have a lot of wisdom to share. So, thank you, Joe. We'll learn more about all of that later.
Thanks, Luke.
And our third panelist for today is Graham Burnett. So, Graham is an activist for social and environmental justice since the 1970s. Graham teaches permaculture workshops and courses for the last 20 years and founded Spiral Seed in 2001. He's a regular contributor to loads of different publications like Positive News, the Sunday Times, and the Permaculture magazine. He's also the author of the Vegan Book of Permaculture and the Permaculture Beginner's Guide, and is currently writing another book, The Regenerative Allotment and Garden. Well, welcome, Graham. How are you? Feeling good?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, all good here. Thank you.
Amazing. I am on my journey of getting my first book published as well. I know it takes a lot of love and energy to get that done, and it's incredible that you've been on this journey for so long. How have you found things over the last 1970s, so 50 years of doing activism? Are you feeling like we're going in the right direction?
Yeah. Probably not quite 50 years, probably about 40 years, I would think, but yeah, I mean, you just do what you do, really. And yeah, a few things have changed. I think it's interesting how veganism or plant-based diet, whatever you want to call it, seems to be becoming a lot more kind of mainstream. But yeah, I think there's still a long way to go. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing, there's a big shift. Obviously you can kind of get a lot more vegan products in the supermarkets and shops and things, but it's still caught up in the industrial agriculture system. So I guess what I'm advocating for is actually moving away from that to kind of maybe more localized, small farm, veganic futures. So yeah, thank you.
Amazing. Well, definitely that's something that within my friend circles is talked about a lot. I think everybody sees this industrial way of doing things is just not sustainable. So fantastic, Graham.
For sure.
We have loads of questions that have already been given into us. If you do have any questions as well, please do write them in the chat, and we'll see if we can get through as many as possible. So let's dive in. So firstly, we have some questions about bees. I wonder who's going to take those questions. Okay, first question about bees. So this is from Rosa in Kent. I'll ask, there's a few questions, so we'll just read them all out. So it says, how do bees stay in the air with such small wings compared to their bodies? What is the evolutionary reason for some bees dying once they use their sting? And is it to protect the other bees? So Rosa is a bit of a bee enthusiast. Paul, you have the answers to those questions?
Yep. As regards why they can stay in the air, it comes down to the fact that their wings are basically flexible. If they had rigid wings, they wouldn't be able to stay up there. They have a substance in the wings called resilin, which it allows it to be strong and flexible. It's kind of a rubber type substance. And basically, what they do is they flap their wings in very small beats, very very fast. So basically, they do up to, I think, 240 beats per second. So you can imagine how fast that is, and it's a small. They don't do it all the way back and forward. It's got a small beat, which allows them to stay in the air. That's the basic answer to that one. If they had rigid, for years, they thought they had rigid wings like airplanes, and basically they couldn't understand how they stayed up. But it's because it's not rigid. They twist as they beat their wings. They twist slightly, and it causes kind of little mini hurricanes and air stuff around the wings that allows them to stay in the air.
Amazing. I bet there's some military scientists somewhere trying to figure out how they can make planes do that at the moment.
I'd say they've probably copied it already, to be honest with you. I'd say they've done that. The second part was as regards why some of them developed or evolved to die after they sting. It's basically, for a start, it's only the females that when we talk about bees, it's only the females that sting, and when it comes to the ones that die, it's the female workers in the honeybees that actually are the ones that die after they sting. They can only sting once. Your bumblebees, your solitary bees, basically they have a smooth stinger, so basically they can use it as many times as they want. And the queen honeybee can as well has a smooth stinger, so she can sting more than once. But she tends not to sting. She's usually in the nest. So basically, it would be more for to fight off other queen honeybees. It's the female workers that have a barbed sting in the honeybees. Basically, once they sting, it's basically to keep mammals away from the honey and the hive. The barbs go in and they get stuck in the mammals, in the skin or in our skin. And so when if you got to swat the bee away, she goes to fly away, it actually tears her abdomen off, and basically she leaves it there, and she leaves the sting inside you, and it has the venom sac in it as well. So what happens is, even though you're only stung once, you get multiple doses of that sting. So it's designed to keep larger mammals away, and it also, when they sting and when that happens, they release pheromones which basically alert other bees in the area to come and join in the attack. So it's basically it's survival of the hive. And when it comes to your sorry.
I find bees really fascinating. I have a daughter who's almost 2 years old, and she loves them already. She has a bee teddy bear, and she loves it. She is like drawn to them as well. I guess, Paul, do you want to share a little bit about why you created this project that you have, and why you feel it's so important for us to take care of the bees?
Yeah, it was basically just like I say, we were going down the route. We were going to start growing salads to supply vegan salads, and we looked at it when that happened to us, and we kind of looked into what was happening with bee advocacy and indeed environmental advocacy in Ireland. And a lot of what we came across surprised us, and we kind of felt we had to. We 4 kids. We're concerned, obviously, like most sane people. We're concerned about climate. We're concerned about the future of not the planet, of the future, or the ability to exist on the planet. The planet's always going to be here. It's whether we can exist on it, whether other species can exist on it. And it just seemed to us that the solutions to the issues with bees are well known, and we know the problem. We know the solutions. It's actually putting them in place, and we just found that a lot of the honest, straightforward, real solutions weren't being advocated for. People weren't being told about it. And we also, during the journey, that since go back 5 years, I do very little about bees. I don't know too much about them now, to be honest with you, compared to what there is to know. But we feel what we've done is we've kind of set something up for people to look at and say, right, we've drawn a line in the sand. This was a farm. It was your standard Irish farm, had cattle on it, sheep, etc. And we've taken that back now. We've given it back to nature completely. We don't take anything from it. We have a small area which we're developing into a market garden, a vegan market garden, or veganic market gardens that people can, while they're here visiting, we can go, oh, by the way, you can grow food like this as well. You don't have to do it the other way. But we're not pushy with that. What we're trying to get people is to reconnect with nature and to see what's gone wrong and how easy it is to actually to solve it. And it is easy. Like I say, we see the change here in very quickly in over the years in the farm, and what's happening on it, and the wildflowers coming back, the biodiversity and the nature that is on the farm, because. And we don't do anything with it. We have done things like we've grown fields of sunflowers, whereby we'd have the sunflowers for the insects for the entire summer, and then we wouldn't harvest anything. We'd leave them there for the winter, and then the birds come and feed on them. So our bird population's exploded. We grow crops, or we'll put in crops every year. We're trying to get back to a point. Again, it's to do with financing and making it sustainable. We're trying to get back to a point where we're just back to your species-rich native wildflower meadows here, and basically we never touch the soil again. We hate going into the soil, but because we're kind of I suppose a show project, or we're kind of a project that people look to, and we have to inspire people. We have to get there quickly rather than letting it regenerate itself. So that's what we're doing here. But it's amazing what you can do with a couple of mobile phones and a bit of imagination.
I love it, Paul. Thank you so much for answering so much detail there as well. Okay, we've got loads more questions. So the next question, this is a little bit of a long one, so let's read it out and then see who's going to be best to cover it. I would really like to get going with a forest garden, and last year tried a no-dig area. I covered with layers of cardboard and compost and had a really lovely vegetable and flower garden. But surrounding this patch is speargrass or couch grass. This spring, it has encroached back into the patch with vigor and enthusiasm, which is rather depressing. Whilst I could, over time, put a physical barrier around the patch, I wonder how I can clear enough area for a substantial forest garden to stop the couch grass strangling anything I plant. Once I've blanketed out the weeds prior to initial planting, am I still fighting an earlier horticultural education of get rid of spear grass at any cost unnecessarily? I'm hoping there's a really cheerful answer. That's from Jill. Anyone feel inspired to answer that one?
I can start if you like, but I think Graham will probably have a bit more knowledge than me around the permaculture approach. But yeah, I would say carry on, Jill. We have a similar problem with I can't think what it's called now, bindweed, which it kind of encroaches into things. But I suppose the kind of permaculture approach would be what the problem is the solution. So what is the couch grass trying to tell you? What is the couch grass saying needs to happen here? Maybe it's about digging deep and going deeper to bring up those nutrients. So that's kind of the one side, which I think Graham will have more information about. But I guess if it were us, I would kind of carry on with the layers of cardboard as thick as you can, 2 or 3 layers, and probably wood chip on top as up to kind of 15 centimeters if you can manage that. And then you obviously need to exclude all the light. So and then you could possibly try using deep rooting plants, as a kind of boundary, as a barrier, which might outcompete the couch grass. So comfrey or chicory or daikon or something like that. Or you could also try oversowing with white clover. I would say a mix of white clover, not just one variety, over several seasons. So you could try that as well. But I think as you kind of build, create your forest, your forest garden, your food forest, it will gradually come more into balance, really, and the couch grass will find its own place, not dominating. That's what we'd hope.
Thank you. Graham, you have anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, I think basically what I'd go along completely what Joe said. And I think one of the things is probably, it's all about the whole thing with forest gardening. I think it's about a process of succession. So I think over time, I've had the same situation. I've got a forest garden that I established on an allotment here in South England where I live, and there's a lot of couch grass and bramble that kind of grows. I've been tending that plot for probably about 20 years now, I think, and I say there was a lot of couch grass growing, but over time, as the trees grow and they become larger and the canopy spreads, slowly that kind of the couch grass, the succession, it kind of, both the bramble and the couch grass have kind of receded and other things have come in, so they become, basically with a forest garden, you are kind of replicating that process of succession, moving from grassland through kind of scrubby or shrubby layer, and then you'll be moving towards small trees, and then you'll be moving towards the larger trees. And I think that's what you're kind of replicating. So it's going to take time, I think, to move from one, following that ecological process that you're moving through that. So, just be patient, I think, is the thing. I remember doing a course with Martin Crawford down in Dartington, this is about 10, 12 years ago. And I was talking about my own forest garden. And he was talking about, when you establish your ground cover layer and the spreading plants that would be in the ground cover layer. And I say I was about 10 years into my project then. I said to Martin, so I'm, rather shamefully, I haven't really thought about the ground cover layer at the moment. I've still got all this grass and couch grass and stuff. And I'm only really starting to think about putting in a ground cover layer now. And I thought, Martin Crawford, he'll be like, that's terrible. But his reply was, actually, that is exactly as it should be. You're in this for the long game. This is the long-term kind of ecosystem development there. So yeah, I think just like, maybe obviously you don't want your couch grass encroaching too much on your new trees and things like that. But so by all means, put down cardboard and put some wood chip on top and stuff. Spot mulching rather than sheet mulching, that you're just kind of, mulching those to protect those trees, to keep the moisture in and stop the less desirable plants from encroaching. But I say, yeah, it's all about the long game, and slow and steady wins the race, I think, as David Holmgren says. So yeah,
Thanks,
and as
Graham.
you said, keep doing what you're doing. So
thank you. Changes the game when you think about it over a 20-year period. That's definitely a different way to think about things, isn't it? Amazing. We've got a question here from Debbie. Can Veganic feed the world? Are there examples of some large-scale veganic farms? Is there any great projects any of you feel inspired to share about? Can we make this something that can feed the whole world?
Do you want me to start again? Do you want to start again? I'm sure we can talk about this.
We'll do it as a double hand. You can go for it, Joe. Go for it.
I'll go for it, and we'll hopefully agree. Thanks, Debbie. I think absolutely, Veganic is really the only green, properly sustainable, and healthy nutritional way that we can ensure that people are fed. But we're not going to do that through big agri-chemical companies or big corporations or even big landowners or big farms. We need small farms, and we need a decentralized farming system. So we also need kind of collaboration. I think more collaboration between farmers, between growers and producers as well. But just thinking about a film we watched the other night, and you've probably heard of Vandana Shiva and her work in India, and her book Who Really Feeds the World. I think it's something like that. And she explains that 80% of the food that we eat comes from small farms. So we don't need to think about that scaling up. I think it's much more about decentralization. And if we think at the moment about that concept of feeding the world, I struggle with that whole concept of feeding the world. I think it's based on the lies of agri-chemical companies and the kind of the foundations of the so-called green revolution, and that push for more homogenized crops and GMOs and increased use of chemicals and crops that depend on chemicals. So just I'm thinking about if we think about 80% of the grain that we grow in this country, in the UK, is fed to intensively farmed animals. So that arable, majority of the arable that you see around is fed to animals where it could be fed to humans, human animals. And we've got probably around 2.5 billion human people in the world who are malnourished. So, we're not feeding the world, whatever that means. But, I have an issue with that concept anyway. I think it's kind of founded on imperialism and capitalism and patriarchy. And really, it's another way, I think, of saying white man's burden. So, we need to move away from that stuff. It's, and as I say, looking at decentralized farming, and there's some good stuff happening. I think, there's some positives coming out. And the new Elm scheme, I think, is looking kind of positive-ish. It's still not saying enough about land reform and agrarian reform. Other countries are doing much better than us on that. India and countries in Central and South America are much more advanced than us with land reform stuff. But there's good stuff. There's kind of like things like, well, obviously the veganic movement, the permaculture movement. People are starting to hear about these things. Even organic. You think how long that's taken to get into people's psyches, but it's really shifting now. And also things like Alliance, the Alliance's Land Workers Alliance, that kind of thing, the Indigenous Farmers Alliance, the Grain Alliances. We're part of the Southeast Grain Alliance, which is all about heritage varieties and kind of those collaborations really with growers and producers. So yeah, sorry, I've probably waffled on a bit too long.
It's nice to know this. Nice to know there's so much going on, Joe, and that there's all these alliances and different things that are happening, because most people never hear about that. And so, yeah, it's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, there's lots of positive stuff.
Anybody else feel to share on this? Can Veganic go global? Can this be something sustainable for the whole world?
Just quickly on it. I mean, I think a lot of what Joe said, like, is right on the button there. We need to feed communities, not the world. But that's where it's wrong. We're looking. I come from a country that boasts that we feed 50 million people. We have a population of around 5 billion, and we have our prime minister, our Taoiseach, saying we're boasting that we feed, but they don't bring into that the cost to the environment, the cost to the true costs of that. I think we need to start looking at, we don't value food. We don't put a true value on food. It's produced cheaply, but that cheap production puts money into the wrong hands. And the narrative in this country anyway is, I mean, I talk to small farmers all the time, and they're not represented. Family farms aren't represented. It's all about big beef, big dairy, exporting as much money as we can, and damn what happens around it. And until we really tackle that, and maybe we need to look at charging what it actually costs to grow food, and bringing in a food stamps on the other side, or some to help people to pay for the actual price, so they actually value the food. But as regards, I mean, I always feel environmentalists and vegans and people that are trying to change things, they spend their time trying to validate themselves. We don't have to validate. We know we can feed the world veganically. We can feed the world organically. The narrative comes from the big companies that we can't, and we just need to start dismissing that and go, not arguing, just we know we can. So let's not get into that petty argument. It's will we. It's not can we, it's will we.
Amazing. Love your passion, Paul. That's great. Anything you want to share on that, Graham? You're muted, Graham. If you can just unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah, just totally echo what Paul and Joe have both said. And I think maybe it's coming at the question the wrong way, like it's not so much can, veganic permaculture feed the world. I think the question is, can industrialized, chemical-based, animal-based agriculture feed the world? And in the long term, I think the answer is no. Those systems are starting to kind of collapse, and the fragility of those systems. We've seen all that through the pandemic. We've seen all these kind of shortages and all the global crises that are happening at the moment, all the sunflower oil shortages caused by the war that's going on, in Ukraine and stuff. So definitely, it's the existing system can't continue to feed the world. I totally also echo what Joe said, that, the idea, are there these large scale farms? I don't actually think that is probably if we're just going to replicate the system that's already there, but just, taking the animals out and taking the chemicals out, then we may be just reproducing the same problems. I'd recommend to anyone who wants to kind of follow this up, a read of Paul, I think it's Paul Smage has written a book. Chris Smage has written a book called Small Farm Futures. It's not a totally veganic approach, but it's very much about, small farms, independent, decentralized, localized farms run by people who actually understand their own local conditions, that are kind of linked into their own communities. And, that's kind of the way forward. So thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of small farms, rather than thinking about, can we have lots of big farms? And I think, the examples of people like Ian Tolhurst, who's down in Reading, or just outside Reading, who's been running, as I'm sure most listeners or viewers are aware, has been running kind of, a vegan organic growing project, 17 acres, that's, been economically viable for a long time. And people like Hodney Dodds, who are kind of linking up small growers and, things like that. They're the future, I think, rather than thinking, can we have large scale farming, large scale agriculture?
Okay. Thank you all so much. It was a big shock for me when I interviewed a wonderful lady from the Organisation for Stock-Free Farmers, and she shared that the UK government give out 2 to 3 billion in subsidies every year to farmers for dairy and these animal-based products, just to keep them going. And if they just gave that 2 to 3 billion instead to veganic growers, then it would change everything. So it's one of the big parts of the mission, isn't it, to change the whole system? And we'll all keep doing the good work. And one of the things we're doing that really made a big impact in me last year, it was one of my favorite things last year, is the Vegan Organic Festival, and it is back for 2022. So if any of you would like to come and hang out with the people from the Vegan Organic Network, and you want to come and meet some growers and farmers and different people who are doing amazing projects, put these dates in your diary. It's the 18th to the 22nd of August.
Hey,
and it's out in...
I'm getting better every day. I'm getting better every day. Getting better every day. Getting better. Let the healing shine. Let the healing shine into your body and your mind. Into your body and your mind. Feel the healing shine. Feel the healing shine. Feel the healing shine. Feel the healing shine. You are the soul you are.
There you go. Hopefully that got you excited. So it's out in Cornwall. It would be a beautiful weekend of healing, entertainment, lots of thought-provoking things. And yeah, it was one of my highlights of last year. So hopefully you can come and join us 18th to 22nd of August. Fantastic. Let's dive into some more questions. So we have a question here. Hi, Vegan Organic Network, and thanks for the show. This is from Jane in Potter's Bar. I'd really like to grow mushrooms veganically. Chestnuts are my favorite. I don't know how or what medium to use. Do you have any experience or advice for this? Anyone feel inspired to share? How can they grow some veganic mushrooms?
Go on, Graham, you must have some experience. We've got some experience, but not necessarily of it working. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's still
same
useful,
here.
isn't it? You know, but yeah, we tried some. We did a bit of a mushroom trial growing mushrooms in it was King Stropharia in Woodchip, and I think it would have worked. It was just a bit too dry. It's just dry all the time now, isn't it? But in where we are, in kind of in the southeast, it's just a mad dry spring again. But yeah, I think it was probably wrong timing and too dry, and then the blackbirds just had a good old time in the woodchip, so that disturbed the mycelium. But then, yeah, we've also we've just done a couple of logs, chestnut logs with shiitake mushrooms. So we'll see how those go. But there are two people I know who, there's two people I know who I would go to about mushrooms, about growing mushrooms are Martin. I know Martin Crawford's done quite a bit. And but the person we got our mushroom plugs from was Anne Miller in Scotland, and she knows loads and loads. So because we're at the moment relocating the farm, and once we're kind of settled again in the new base, we'll try again and get some more advice from people. So, but I'm not sure that's that much help to whoever it was who answered the question. I've forgotten.
Thanks. Any input, Graham? Anything you think could help?
Yeah, I think again I'd echo what Joe's saying, and coffee grounds is also another potential. I've had some success growing in coffee grounds, but I know other people who've had a great deal of success. In fact, there was a local business around here. Some local people actually set up a business where they were trying to do like a closed loop system, basically. So they would go around to like local restaurants and cafes and places like that and collect all the coffee grounds, and then they would inoculate the coffee grounds with oyster mushroom spawn and a couple of other varieties. I can't remember what they were. And the spawn would obviously colonize the coffee grounds, and they were producing some amazing crops. Unfortunately, the idea was it was going to be like a closed loop system. The idea was that they would then kind of sell back to various local restaurants and things. But they actually had problems actually finding a market, finding buyers for their mushrooms. And in the end, I think it didn't work out. But actually, you know, it did really, really well, you know, in terms of actually growing. They were growing tons and tons of mushrooms. They just couldn't find anyone to buy them. But I think on a small scale, you know, if you're just growing for yourself in your kitchen or something, definitely have a go with coffee grounds. But keep them fresh. You know, you've got to use them really, really quickly. Because the thing is with mushrooms and fungi, there's all these, you know, as I'm sure most viewers and listeners are aware, there are billions upon billions of spores floating about us all the time, and they'll kind of get in there quick, like the wild mushrooms, the wild fungi will get in there quick. So it's important to use your coffee grounds very fresh, I think. You know, don't keep, I think this is why I've not had a great, we don't drink a huge amount of coffee in our house, so I was kind of saving up coffee grounds, and of course by the time got around to inoculating with again, I got them from Ann Miller that Joe mentioned, the spore. I think all the wild fungi had got in there already and kind of became dominant and got the upper hand. So yeah, definitely coffee grounds, fresh wood chip, again, very, very fresh. Joe mentioned inoculating kind of logs and stuff like that. Again, they need to be very, very fresh, and you need to inoculate with kind of dowels, like, and you'll drill holes and you push the dowels in. And I'm gesticulating here, but you can't see my hands. You'll kind of push the dowels into the holes and you kind of seal those with wax. Otherwise, the wild fungi will get in there. I think it's important to make sure those logs don't come into contact with the ground either, because again, the wild fungi will get in there. But again, just experiment, you know. So basically, many things could be used as substrates, and I'd recommend the work of Paul Stamets and Peter McCoy if you want to kind of follow this stuff up. Paul Stamets, who's written Mycelium Running, and Peter McCoy's written what's it called? Radical Mycology, I think is the name of his book. So
amazing, thank you.
Yeah,
we actually have another fungi-based question, so let's ask this one as well while we're on the subject. It's from Dawn in Devon. She says, mycorrhizal fungi, what are they and what do they do and how can I add them to my garden?
Okay, are you happy for me to take the
please
this one? Okay, I'm probably gonna go off on a bit of a tangent and get very excited about this. It's one of my favorite subjects at the moment. So we talked there about there are different, the thing with fungi is they are a separate species, a separate kind of branch of the kingdom of life from animals and plants, and in fact are more closely related to animals than they are to the plant kingdom. And what they share in common with the animal kingdom is that they can't create their own food from sunlight, unlike plants. So we don't have chlorophyll, and neither do fungi. So we can't actually create our own food. So we need to get our food secondhand, and we do that from plants, obviously, and fungi do that from plants. And there are three main ways. There's more than three, but for the purposes of keeping it simple, there are three main ways that fungi do this. There's our saprophytic fungi, which feed on kind of dead plant material. We just talked about some of those, the fungi like oyster mushrooms, things like that, that will feed on dead wood or dead coffee, you know, or used coffee grounds, that kind of thing, and get the nutrients in that way. There are parasitic fungi, which actually have a one-way kind of relationship with the plant. They'll take nutrients from the plant, but don't actually give anything back. And that'd be things like our honey fungus, things like that. that can actually be quite detrimental to plant health, but actually do play a role in the ecosystem. And then we have those fungi that have a symbiotic relationship with the plant, and then that it's a two-way process. So the plant is, or rather fungi is getting kind of carbohydrates and sugars from the plant that it couldn't otherwise obtain itself. And in return, the fungi is obtaining various nutrients like phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, all kinds of other things, and making those available to the plant. So it's almost like a secondary, when we talk about mycorrhiza, it's actually a relationship between the plant root and the fungi. So you've got myco, derived from the Latin, like mycology, it's the fungi, and rhiza is the kind of Latin for root. So it's actually the coming together of kind of root and fungus to form this kind of joint organism. And it's only relatively recently, it's very, very new, really, that we're our kind of understanding of mycorrhizal fungi. And people have known about mycorrhizal fungi for a long time, probably, a couple of centuries. But it was believed for a long time that the relationship was parasitic rather than mutually beneficial, symbiotic. I've actually got gardening books from as recently as like the 1940s and 1950s that talk about mycorrhizal fungi as, you've got mycorrhizal fungi in your garden, you want to get rid of them, kill them, they're terrible. But it's only kind of relatively recent we've actually understood that this is actually a mutually beneficial relationship. And we're learning more and more and more about mycorrhiza and how important they are. All the time. I said I was going to go off on one, didn't I?
Yeah, bringing it back, Graham, bringing it back. Just looking at the time.
Sorry. But one of the really important things I think about mycorrhiza is that they actually, one of the kind of byproducts of this relationship is they actually produce a substance called glomalin, which massively increases the capacity of soil to store carbon. So there's a lot, environmentalists quite rightly say, if we want to stop global warming and climate change, we need to plant more trees, which is true, but it's actually the fungi and the mycorrhiza that are actually doing the heavy lifting here in terms of carbon capture by creating the substance called glomalin. I could go on, but I think I better stop.
Thank you. Much appreciated. I saw an amazing documentary called Fantastic Fungi recently, and it was so good. I recommend everybody go and check that out. You'll have a whole different appreciation for fungi and how important they are to everything. Really, really mind-blowing. So just looking at the time, we have come to the end of this particular Veganic Gardeners question time. I hope you enjoyed it, everyone who tuned in, and thank you all so much, Graham and Joe and Paul, for tuning in and sharing your magic with us once again. It's a real pleasure to share this with you. If you have not already, everyone who's tuning in, please go to veganorganic.net and do subscribe to help support the Vegan Organic Network. You can get the magazine, you can get the yearly subscription, or you can get a lifetime membership as well. And the work that the Vegan Organic Network does is amazing. So the more supporters we have, the more we can do. Signing off from me. And please do contact us if you have any questions you'd like on the next Veganic Gardeners question time as well. And we'll try and get all of your questions answered. So thank you so much and have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.